Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahabushai, Bahasham, Barakahak Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahabushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who ruled and teach well. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video. And in this video, I'll be profiling this clip from Lena Petrova's YouTube channel titled $300 billion Warning. Saudi Arabia warns G7 against stealing $300 billion in Russian sovereign assets. And hey, this is just another, example showing that we are living at the end of Esau Edom, the so-called white man's rulership. These nations outside of the so-called West are turning against her, even, her allies. And, what this is ultimately going to culminate into is World War III and nuclear missiles being fired. And the United States of America, which is really the ringleader for all the fuckery going on, being wiped off the face of the earth by 200 million nuclear missiles. But this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes. And remember, Saudi Arabia, who has been a very close ally of the United States of America for a long time, just recently decided to not renew, the petrodollar deal, which is a major blow to the strength of the US dollar.
Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for joining me. I have to admit that I cannot wait to share this shocking news with you. You know you're doing something wrong when even your own allies start turning against you. According to the latest reports, Saudi Arabia effectively issued a warning to G7 over them seizing, or let's just be honest, stealing $300 billion in frozen Russian sovereign assets. The warning was made to EU states, where Saudi Arabia made it clear that if the EU and the United States move forward with their own plan, which I discussed in great detail previously here on my channel, if they choose to move forward with it, Saudi Arabia will then sell its European debt holdings. If anything, this is a...
Hey, and Lena Petrova just made a very prophetic statement. You know you're doing something wrong when even your own allies are turning against you. And like I said at the beginning of the video, Esau Edom, vis-a-vis the West's allies are turning against her. This is the book of Obadiah. I'm start at verse 1 and then jump down to verse 7. And, I've been going into the book of Obadiah a lot lately because these are the times we're living in. And like I've said in my previous videos, the book of Obadiah is dedicated to the downfall of you Edomites. And as the header reads, Edom will be humbled. The vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord Yahweh concerning Edom, you so-called white people, you Americans, Canadians, British, Europeans, Russians, South Afrikaners, the 1948ers over in the Holy Land, etc., etc. We have heard a rumor from Yahweh, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Now I'm going to jump down to verse 7. All the men of thy confederacy, or your allies, have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. And remember what Lena Petrova just said. You know you're doing something wrong when even your own allies are turning against you. And with the West planning on confiscating $300 billion worth of Russian assets, what did Saudi Arabia just say? Hey, we're going to drop, I think it was $700 billion worth of European assets. That's going to affect those European Edomites, these American Edomites as well. And also, what did I just say? That Saudi Arabia decided not to renew the petrodollar deal. So Saudi Arabia, who's been at peace with the West for the longest time, is starting to turn against the West. They that eat thy bread Saudi Arabia receives a lot of military weaponry and defense from the United States of America, have laid a wound under thee, waging, economic war, so to speak, against the West, chiefly the U.S., and hey, aligning themselves more with the East, with Russia. And we know Russia is a major player with the BRICS, along with China, and getting a lot of these second and third world countries to shift focus from the West to the East to find an alternative, economically and politically from them. There is none understanding in him.
Major development that indicates this increasing multipolarity with centers of power now located outside of Washington. Sure, Washington is one of them, but it no longer has the final word. Reportedly, Saudi Arabia's finance ministry privately communicated to G7 countries their opposition to the idea of seizing sovereign assets of another state. Specifically, the Saudis indicated that they are considering selling Western debt holdings in response, and that they would start with the debt issued by the French Treasury. I will remind you that several weeks ago...
And hey, the French are just getting their asses beat right now. You're having riots over the elections taking place over there. I did a video the other day on how several West African countries are telling them to get out and have already kicked, them out in some form or fashion. And now you got Saudi Arabia saying, look, we're going to start with those French assets.
G7 leaders agreed to give loans directly to Ukraine that will be repaid using the profits generated by Russia's sovereign assets. This is similar to your bank or your credit union taking the interest that your savings accounts or your investment accounts earn, then calling it theirs, no longer yours, and then handing it over as a loan to your adversary. That is the EU's plan, by the way, that was communicated following their latest G7 meeting in June. The Saudi kingdom does hold massive amounts of European bonds, but the value of these bonds isn't what's important here. If they do decide to respond by selling that debt, it will send a strong message to the rest of the world, and it may be safe to assume that other countries will take note of it and will respond in a similar manner, because their main goal is to protect their own assets from increasing risks. Now, I do want to...
And hey, decades ago, hundreds of years ago, you would have never seen nations outside of the West even dare to go against the West. But we're living in the twilight hours of Esau's rulership. So these other nations are seeing that Esau, Edom's countries are declining, economically, morally, and militarily, and they're going with their move. This is Isaiah chapter 14. I'm going to start at verse 12. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? And heaven in the scriptures can be symbolic for a condition. Heaven when you're in your rulership, and hell when you're in captivity or underneath another nation. And Lucifer just simply means light bringer. Anybody that has, so-called knowledge, wisdom, and understanding would be considered what? A light bearer, a Luciferian. That's why the elites call themselves the Illuminati, or the illuminated ones. This isn't talking about the spiritual demon Satan, because he doesn't have any free will. There wasn't any war in heaven, and he's actually the top left-handed angel of the Most High that can't do anything without the Most High's go-ahead. Go read Job chapter 1 and Job chapter 2. But let's get that word Lucifer in the Strongs. Strong's H 1966.
Strong's H 1966. Haleo. Haleo.
Haleo. Was to say the root word H 1984 in the sense of brightness. And when we go to the outline of biblical usage, it says light bearer, shining one, morning star. And hey, Yahawashi in Revelation, and Yahawashi is the true name of the Son of the Most High, who people ignorantly refer to as so-called Jesus, he's referred to as the bright morning star. Shining one, morning star, Lucifer, here's the main point, of the king of Babylon, and Satan, figuratively, Hillel, describing the king of Babylon. And in the scriptures, the United States of America is Babylon the Great, Mystery Babylon in Revelation chapter 17. And the king of Babylon is ultimately the elites that run this country, not the president, not the executive branch, not the Senate or Congress. It's the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and these other elite, families and banking families. And they see their power is waning as well. That's why they're rushing to push forward, their NW0, that great RESET, that fourth industrial revolution. But again, how art thou fallen from heaven, from rulership, O Lucifer, son of the morning? And what did it say? Figuratively of the king of Babylon. The king of Babylon being the elites, and what? Babylon being America. And like I said at the beginning of the video, America is, the ringleader that the elites are using to dictate, to the rest of the world, and use these NATO and EU countries as their, what do they call that? As their vassal states to help them in their endeavors. How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? And when you go, I believe it's in either Isaiah 50 or Jeremiah 50. It says, how art thou cut asunder, Babylon, the hammer of the earth. And America has been used as the hammer of the earth to what? Weaken the nations, putting sanctions on them, going to war against them, etc., etc. And then what? America and her European vassal states, they've been used to do the same thing. And as we're seeing, they're weakening on all level. These different nations are starting to move from the west to the east because they're sick of all this oppression that they're going through. And, unfair political, business, and military practices. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of the Most High. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. And these Edomites, especially these elites, have a God complex. They want to usurp the authority of the Most High. Hence why they want everybody to be in this cashless digital society they're creating with what? That C-hip implant in you. And this Isaiah 13 lines up perfectly back with Obadiah chapter 1 verse 3. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock. And you Edomites, your original home was Mount Petra, which was what? Built into a mountain. And then for a time you lived in the Caucasus Mountains, and you were the original cavemen. And you came out of those caves, and now you built these modern day caves, these skyscrapers, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle. And what nation of people has been known for using the eagle as their symbol? From Rome to Nazi Germany to the United States of America. And though thou set thy nest among the stars, remember what it said, for thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, and I will exalt my throne above the stars of the Most High. That right there, talking about him setting his throne above the stars of the Most High, is Esau Edom ruling over the children of Israel right now, who are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars. And what that can also go into is what? Esau Edom having these satellites and space stations in low orbit space. Thence will I bring thee down, saith Yahweh. And remember what it said back in Isaiah 14 verse 12. How art thou fallen from heaven? How art thou fallen from rulership, from that high and lofty place, O Lucifer, son of the morning? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of the Most High. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. And the United States of America is also known as what? North America. This is the sides of the north where he's sitting upon the mount of the congregation. The children of Israel, the stars of the Most High. I will ascend above the height of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Hey, again, setting his satellites and space stations and other assets in low orbit space. But what's it about to say? Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit, being brought from your heavens to your hell, to captivity. Because after you Edomites are taken out of power, your entire nation is going into hardcore bondage and slavery for the first 1,000 years of the kingdom of heaven, building it up for free, just how the children of Israel built up America and this whole European, colonialist system for free, to the sides of the pit. And your rulership is going to be in the grave. It's going to be dead. Here's the main point I wanted to get to. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake the kingdoms? And remember what Lena Petrova said. It's not so much about the price of those assets Saudi Arabia is threatening to sell off. It's just the fact that they're publicly putting that idea out there, which has given other nations the idea to what? Take similar measures to protect themselves. They're seeing that, Esau Edom is weakening, and he isn't that same dragon, that proud eagle that he was decades ago, hundreds of years ago, that shook the kingdoms, that made the nations weak with what? The times of colonialism, his military might, all that. Verse 17, that made the world as the wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof. And whenever Esau, goes to these different countries, just look at Iraq. Hey, just look at Libya for recent examples. Hey, he turns those countries into a wilderness, and he literally, destroys them, bombs them back into the Stone Age. And then they're a spiritual wilderness as well, because when Esau comes and brings his democracy, what comes with it? Alphabet people, adultery, feminism, etc., etc., that open not the house of the prisoners. Hey, America is the country with the highest prison population on the planet. And who makes up the majority of that population? You so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, the children of Israel. So hey, everything Lena Petrova is saying is lining up perfectly with biblical prophecy.
To make it clear that I do not believe that this warning was made in an aggressive fashion. Many YouTubers and commentators elsewhere really love to make it appear as though there's always some type of a confrontation or aggression. However, countries just like people don't have to agree on everything, and Saudi Arabia, as well as several other states in the region, Turkey is one of them, they've gotten more and more skilled at playing multiple sides
And we know, as pursuant to Ezekiel chapter 38, that Turkey, which is known as Gomer, is eventually going to completely abandon the West and ally themselves with Russia, Gog, the land of Magog. So, Lena Petrova, hey, she brings out good information, but she just doesn't understand fully the times we're living in. There's a time and a season for everything, as it says in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. There's a time for talking and refraining from talking. There's a time to live. There's a time to kill. There's a time of peace and a time of war. And we're in all the negatives right now because we're living in the last days. And these are aggressive actions being made because these are what? Changing the socio-political and socio-economic structure that's been in place for the last, decades and hundreds of years.
multiple angles, I should say, at once. Remember that Saudi Arabia is very much aligned with the West in terms of its security policy. And it's not in the Saudis' interest to retaliate directly. They want to attract Western investments. They want to be able to purchase weapons and military technologies from the West.
Hey, they that eat thy bread receive all these benefits, have laid a wound under thee.
They have been doing for decades. But at the same time, in this new multipolar paradigm, it is crystal clear that they now want to play an increasingly important role geopolitically and to lead a more independent policy.
By stopping the killing, by stopping the blockade, by allowing enough humanitarian aid to go in to support the Palestinians. The Palestinians do not want to leave their land, and we are not going to encourage them or force them to leave their land, and we're not going to work with anyone who has that agenda. The Palestinians have a right to their land, and they have a right to live in safety and security and dignity on their land, and that is what we will push for, and that is what we will work towards.
Clearly, making such a warning in private is all that's needed to convey their view on the actions of the EU and the United States. Several weeks ago, Volodymyr Zelensky visited Saudi Arabia and he met with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. At the same time, Saudi Arabia had an extraordinary welcome for President Putin during his most recent visit. Moreover, the Saudi Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was in attendance at Zelensky's so-called peace summit in Switzerland, indicated that any peace negotiations are useless without communicating directly with Russia. Therefore, with the world being clearly multipolar, Saudi Arabia appears to show that perhaps it is willing to lead a more independent foreign policy moving forward. Saudi Arabia could have made this type of a warning for two reasons. One, in order to protect its own interest, and two, as a sign of solidarity with Russia. In this particular case, I believe that Saudi Arabia is not trying to do any favors to Russia. The Saudis are acting in their own best interest. First, such a warning, reportedly issued privately of course, indicates their position that's contrary to that of the West. So they're now comfortable and willing to be more straightforward and to not align with the West. Second, the Saudis want to minimize the risk for themselves. If the EU does go through with the plan, I'm confident that we will see considerable cash outflows from Western institutions, not just as the result of Saudi Arabia selling its debt holdings, but if tensions continue to escalate, countries will align more politically and is likely not going to be in favor of the NATO bloc countries. Why? Well, this is because the global majority does not want a war.
Because
Get rid of some of these. This is Habakkuk chapter 2. I'm going to read verses 4 to 7. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. And his soul which is not lifted up is upright in him, is speaking of these Edomites, because they were, they're the wicked from the womb. They were created to do everything clean contrary to righteousness. Hence, why their whole society is completely opposite to the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. Yeah, also because he transgresseth by wine. His philosophies out here, his ways of life. Democracy, capitalism, communism, socialism, the isms, the alphabet lifestyle, feminism, etc., etc. He is a proud man, neither keepeth at home. And what's become a pejorative term for you Edomites lately? Oh, you colonizer. And during the last couple of 100 years, what have you been doing? Going to these other countries, setting up puppet governments. So what? You can grape those people of their resources and of their ways of life. He is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Getting everybody under the umbrella of this Western system, this Western mindset, where these Edomites get all the benefits, while these countries that, the resources and the riches and the blood and sweat come from get swept under the rug. These nations are sick of this. And also, what does it sound like when you're heaping all nations and people under you? A one world order, which, these Luciferians, these elites are pushing for. Their NW0, that great RESET, that fourth industrial revolution where you will own nothing and be happy and eat the bugs. Verse 6, shall not all these take up a parable against him and a taunting proverb against him and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, which Saudi Arabia is doing. Look, those 300 billion in Russian assets don't belong to you. If you confiscate them, hey, we're threatening to confiscate and sell off your assets in the billions. How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. And when you go into that word clay, it means debt or pledges. And the United States of America alone is the biggest debtor nation on the face of the earth. Student loan debt, credit card debt, housing debt, etc., etc. America has propped itself up by selling its debt off through those treasury bonds to other countries. But when countries de-dollarize and no longer take those treasury bonds, all that debt is going to come flooding back to the United States of America, which, hey, a lot of you Americans out here are feeling the pinch of inflation, which is going to become hyperinflation. Verse 7, shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them. And what Lita Petrova just said is what? Them rising up suddenly to bite the West, looking to an alternative, planning on taking away their assets and, draining their resources from the West to help themselves out and no longer help these Edomites.
The war is not coming from the sky. The war is a result of decision of definite persons, So therefore, we have to find those leaders of the world. Hungary is not among them, for obvious reasons. Whose decision will decide peace or war? Ukraine is one, Russia also, because finally, at the end of the day, they will make the decision. But very important, what is the approach of China, United States, and European Union? China has a peace plan. America runs a war policy. And Europe, instead of having our autonomous strategical approach and position, we are simply copying the American position. So, sorry to say, but
what I say, these European countries are what? Vassal states of the United States of America that when America says jump, they say how high. And as you notice, it's always these European nations that feel the blowback from American adventurism abroad. Who's getting all those refugees from these different wars that have been waged over the last, couple of decades? Europe. Who's on the front line of a war with Russia? Europe. Who is not benefiting from sanctions on Russia since they received a lot of their natural gas, oil, and other resources from Russia? Europe. But this is Daniel chapter 7. I'm going to start at verse 19. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, those legs of iron in Daniel chapter 2, the ancient pagan Roman Empire, which was the empire of the Edomites, which was diverse from all the others because what? They had a Senate house like America and a lot of these other European countries. They had a consul and a proconsul, which is like a president and a vice president, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And as we know, the Roman Empire was a powerhouse in its heyday. Verse 20, and the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell. And now we're coming into the last leg of that fourth beast, those iron toes mixed with miry clay in Daniel chapter 2, the reincarnated Roman Empire. the NATO EU system that the US is a part of and at the head of. And this all began to be set in place back during the late 1300s with the Renaissance, or the rebirth, when Esau Edom began to come back into power and rebirth that Roman way. And those three horns who fell before this little horn that came up is speaking of the major players in the so-called New World, North America, before the 13 colonies became the United States of America proper. And those three horns is speaking of Britain, which you had the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812 that they had with America. The French, which you had the Louisiana Purchase, which further expanded the territory of the United States. And then you had the Spanish, which you had the Spanish-American War, which further, increased America's influence on this side of the hemisphere. Even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, the United States of America, whose look was more stout than his fellows, more proud than and strong. And what did Viktor Orban just say? America wants war, and the European nations are pretty much going to do whatever America does because his look is more stout than his fellows.
But Europe has a war policy as well. So my target is first to understand how we could change the position of those elements, those pillars of the situation, their thinking and approach from war to the peace. If China, United States, and Europe would like to have a peace, it's far easier for the Ukrainians and the Russians to find a solution how to stop fighting, how to save lives, how to negotiate and find a durable solution.
Thanks for watching. I hope that this video was interesting and informative.
Hey, that's it with that clip. And as we can see, biblical prophecy just continues to take place at a rapid pace. Apostle Tahar has deemed 2024 to be the hopeful year of Jacob's trouble, and it hasn't been boring for a second. And like I also said earlier in the video, what this is ultimately going to culminate into is World War III and America's allies, even her close European allies, turning against her and shooting nukes on her. Now let's go to Daniel chapter 2. I'm going to start at verse 40. And I just quoted it when I was going through Daniel chapter 7. And this is dealing with that statue of a man that King Nebuchadnezzar of the Neo-Babylonian Empire saw in his dream, and the prophet Daniel interpreted. And those different body parts made of different metals represented the different heathen kingdoms that would rule before, the ushering in of the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of Yasharallah, the kingdom of Israel under the children of Israel. You had the head of gold, which was the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the arms and the breasts of silver, the Medo-Persian Empire, the thigh and the bellies of brass, the Grecian empires, which were also Edomites, the legs of iron, the ancient pagan Edomite Roman Empire. And now we're going to go into that last leg, those iron toes mixed with miry clay. And I like how Blue Letter Bible, made it easier for us by putting these little headers. Daniel chapter 2, verse 40, Rome, and the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, this NATO EU system that the US is a part of and at the head of, which it began to be formed all the way back during the Renaissance. It came to its culmination, after World War II with the Club of Rome. I think it's either the Club of Rome or the Treaty of Rome, which helped set up this system as we see it today. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. And, as these military and economic tensions continue to increase, division between America and her European allies are going to increase as well and lead to further divisions, which what does it say in Mark chapter 3, verse 24 to 25? If a kingdom be divided, that kingdom cannot stand. But there shall be in it of the strength of iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And that part of iron can go into NATO, which is the military aspect of it, and that part of clay, the weaker part, the EU or European Union, the economic part. And then, it can also go into the stronger nations in the system, like the United States of America, Britain, France, and Germany. And then your weaker nations, which are usually referred to as the pigs, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain, which a lot of these stronger nations have to help up economically sometimes. Verse 42, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken, and ultimately it's going to be completely broken. Now I'm going to close it out in Revelation chapter 17, verse 17. And the 10 horns, speaking again of the EU or European Union, beginning with the 10 common markets of the EU, back when it was known as the European Economic Community, which thou sawest upon the beast, NATO, these shall hate the whore that rides upon the beast, Babylon the Great, the United States of America, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire, with nuclear fire, that's going to turn America into the biblical lake of fire from sea to shining sea, and then a desolate, uninhabitable wasteland afterwards. So that's it with this video. With this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharallah, and until next time, Shalom.